The weeks that followed Tegeri's conversation with 𝗟𝗏𝗲 were filled with an uneasy stillness. There was no immediate breakthrough, no sudden rush of warmth or forgiveness that swept over him. It was as if they had both reached an impasse. Tegeri still carried the weight of years of abandonment, and 𝗟𝗏𝗲, despite her repeated apologies, couldn't undo the hurt she had caused. Yet, despite the tension, life continued in Odugbo. Barthez threw himself into his work, continuing to expand the small farm he had spent years building. He even managed to secure a few contracts to supply goods to traders in 𝗪𝗏𝗳𝗏 and Lokoja. It was a modest success, but success nonetheless. He had come so far, and despite everything that had happened, he couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride in the life he had made for himself and his children. But the emotional toll of the past never fully left him. At night, as he lay in bed, the memories of 𝗟𝗏𝗲, their early days, their love, their dreams for a family, came rushing back. He could see her face, hear her laughter, remember the way she had once looked at him with such hope. It was hard to reconcile that woman with the one who had left him, the one who had walked away from everything they had built. 𝗟𝗏𝗳, in particular, seemed to be struggling with the return of her mother. Though she had softened towards 𝗟𝗏𝗲, there were still moments when her old hurt resurfaced. She would retreat into herself, spending hours in her room, reading or studying, while the tension between her parents lingered like an unspoken word. One evening, as Tegeri was finishing his dinner, 𝗟𝗏𝗳 came into the kitchen, her face troubled. "Abba," she began hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" Tegeri sat down his bowl and looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of the silence that had grown between them. "Of course, 𝗟𝗏𝗳, what's on your mind?" 𝗟𝗏𝗳 looked down at her hands, nervously twisting them together. "Do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" Tegeri's heart clenched at the question. He knew the answer. No, things would never go back to the way they were. Too much had happened, too much had changed. But he couldn't bring himself to say it aloud. "No," he replied after a long pause. "But that doesn't mean things can't get better. We can't change the past, but we can try to build something new from what we have." 𝗟𝗏𝗳 nodded slowly, as if processing his words. "I want to believe that," she said quietly, "but it's hard. Papa, I don't know how to trust her again." Tegeri didn't have an easy answer. He too was struggling with his trust in 𝗟𝗏𝗲. He didn't know if he could ever forgive her completely, but he understood that 𝗟𝗏𝗳 and the rest of the children needed him to lead by example. They needed to see that, even in the face of betrayal, forgiveness was possible, not just for 𝗟𝗏𝗲, but for themselves. Meanwhile, in Lokoja, Dangana had been thrown into a world of excitement and opportunity. His time at the university was opening doors he never imagined. He had made friends, joined clubs, and even started working part-time at a local bookstore. But despite his growing success, his heart remained torn. Every time he spoke to his father on the phone, he felt a pang of guilt. Tegeri never asked him for help. He never complained about the burden of raising 3 children on his own, of dealing with the legacy of 𝗟𝗏𝗲's departure. But Dangana knew the strain his father had endured, and though he didn't fully understand how to bridge the gap between them, he wanted to do something. It was in one of these moments of quiet reflection that Dangana made a decision. He would return to Odugbo for a visit, not just to see his family, but to confront the unresolved emotion that had been building inside him. When Dangana arrived in Odugbo, the town felt different. The familiar sights, the old marketplace, the mud houses, the rolling hills in the distance, were all the same. Yet something had changed. It wasn't just the passing of time, but the subtle shift in his family's dynamics. His father, once a pillar of quiet strength, seemed more fragile, more human. 𝗟𝗏𝗲, who had once seemed like an insurmountable figure in his life, was now just another part of the puzzle they were trying to piece together. That evening, after dinner, Dangana found himself alone with his father by the fire. The night was cool, and the stars were clearer than they had been in years. "Abba," Dangana began, his voice softer than usual. "How are you really?" Tegeri looked at his son, surprised by the question. For years, he had been the one to hold everything together, never showing weakness. But now, Dangana asked him, he had allowed himself to pause. "I'm tired, Dangana," 𝗟𝗲𝗬𝗿 said honestly. "I've been tired for a long time, raising you all, building this life. It's been a lot, and 𝗟𝗲𝗳𝗲's return, it's been harder than I thought it would be." Dangana nodded, understanding more than his father realized. "I have been thinking about her too," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I even want to." Tegeri sighed, his eyes reflecting a weariness that Dangana had never seen before. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Dangana. It's about letting go of the power the past has over you. I'm not asking you to forgive her, but don't let her actions control your future. Don't let them shape who you are." Dangana sat quietly for a moment, the weight of his father's words sinking in. It was easier said than done, but somehow, he knew his father was right. Holding onto the anger wouldn't change anything. "Do you think we will ever be family again?" Dangana asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tegeri stared into the fire, the crackling flames dancing before him. "I don't know, my son, but I know we can try. We can try to build something new, something better." The next morning, as Dangana prepared to leave, he took a moment to speak to 𝗟𝗲𝗳𝗲. The conversation was short, but it was enough. He had never truly spoken to her since her return, and though he still didn't trust her, he understood that she was just as lost as they were. "I don't know what's in store for us, 𝗟𝗲𝗳𝗲," Dangana said, his voice steady, "but I think I'm ready to give you a chance. Not for me, but for my siblings." 𝗟𝗲𝗳𝗲 looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "Thank you, Dangana. I will prove to you that I have changed." As Dangana left Odubo, he felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step forward. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that perhaps his family could heal. Hope that they could build something new together, despite the past that weighed heavily on them. Back in Odubo, Tegeri watched his children slowly begin to piece their lives together. There were no grand gestures, no sudden moments of reconciliation, but there was a quiet understanding that healing was happening. One small step at a time. The price of healing, Tegeri knew, was high, but it was worth every sacrifice.